The Indian Struggle by Subhash Chandra Bose, Part-12. The barometer rises, 1927 to 1928. By the middle of 1927, the darkest hour had ended and the horizon began to light up. Disgusted with the narrow sectarianism, selfishness and fanaticism which had seized the country after the death of the Deshbandhu, the soul of the people began to stir itself again. In the new awakening, the contribution of the youth was the largest. The leadership of the Congress was on the whole found wanting. Mahatma Gandhi was suffering from the acute mental depression and was living in retirement from active politics. Pandit Motilal Nehru had left for Europe, partly owing to professional reasons and partly because of the serious illness of his daughter-in-law. In the circumstances, the responsibility of leadership was vested in Mr. Srinivas Iyer, and he endeavored to rise to the occasion. He spent much of his time in 1927 in touring the country for restoring intercommunal amity and friendship. His crowning achievement during the year was a successful session of the Unity Conference in Calcutta in November, convened and presided over by him, which was to pave the way for the coming upheaval in Bengal, where the worst demonstrations of communal passion had taken place during the 1926. There were signs of the dawn of a new era. In August, as a result of a vote of no confidence in the Bengal Legislative Council, the ministers were once again thrown out. About this time, a strike broke out in the biggest railway workshop of the Bengal-Nagpur Railway at Kharagpur. 17 miles off from Calcutta, the workers' organization was so strong that the company had to climb down and meet the demand of the workers. In November, the Unity Conference in Calcutta helped to clear the atmosphere and restore the friendship feelings hitherto existing between Hindus and Muslims community. Later in the month, when the annual meeting of the Bengal Congress was held, there were signs of enthusiasm among the Congress workers of Bengal. The most patent impetus to the new awakening came, however, from the side of the government. It was an auspicious moment for the Indian nationalists when, in November 1927, the Viceroy Lord Irwin made an announcement regarding the appointment of the Indian Statutory Commission. The appointment was made under Section 84A of the Government of India Act 1919, which provided for decennial reviews of the political situation in India, somewhat reminiscent of the political surveys made by the British Parliament into the affairs of the East India Company at the time of the renewal of the company's charter. Since the statutory commission was due in 1929, it was rather surprising to find a Tory government accelerating the date of the commission. The Indian National Congress had been pressing since 1924 a round table conference for revising the constitution with a view to the early introduction of Dominion Home Rule, but this demand had been consistently turned down by the British government. The Conservative Party had ever taken kindly to the reforms of 1919, for which the Liberal Mr. Montagu had been largely responsible. Though Indian opinion considered them inadequate and unsatisfactory, they therefore wanted to dispose of the Indian question themselves while they were in power, so that the Labour Party, if they happened to succeed them, would not be able to make any further concessions to the Indian demand for home rule. Since the next general election in England was due in 1929, the Conservative cabinet found it necessary to appoint the Statutory Commission in 1927. The commission was composed of Sir John Simon, Viscount Burman, Lord Siddharth Kona, Honorable Edward Cadogan, Mr. Stephen Welsh, Major Attlee and Colonel Lane Fox, and was succeeded by Mr. Verman. There were 7 members of whom 2 were labourers, 1 was a Liberal and the rest were conservatives. Thus, the cooperation of all the parties in Britain was secured for the work of the commission. The commission was charged with the inquiring into the working of the system of government, the growth of education and the development of representatives institutions in British India and matters connected therewith, and to what extent it is desirable to establish the principle of responsible government, or to extend, modify or restrict the degree of responsible government then existing therein, including the question whether the establishment of second chambers of the local legislatures is or is not desirable. It was started on behalf of the government that Indians had a preference to be excluded from the commission because it was an exclusively parliamentary commission, and the necessity of having parliamentary commission was explained by the Viceroy in the following words. It would be generally agreed that what is required is a commission which would be unbiased and competent to present an accurate picture of facts to Parliament, but it must also be a body on whose recommendations Parliament should be found willing to take whatever action a study of these facts may indicate to be appropriate. Simultaneously with the announcement of the commission, the Viceroy and the governors of provinces invited a number of public men in order to explain to them the motive and intention of the government. The commission was appointed by royal warrant of November 26, 1927, and Lord Brinton had the Secretary of State for India. While speaking in the House of Lords the same month on the appointment of the commission, challenged Indian politicians to produce an agreed constitution for India. The announcement regarding the statutory commission evoked a chorus of condemnation from the Congress leaders of all parts of India, as also from the public at large. The public had become so much accustomed to the idea of self-determination for India that they no longer regarded the British Parliament as the arbitrator of India's destiny. It was therefore but natural that the Congress should without hesitation or delay decide to boycott the commission, popularly known as the Simon Commission. That was of course no surprise for the government, but what did surprise them was the decision of the Indian liberals to boycott the commission. It was not the violation of the principle of self-determination which offended them, but the exclusion of Indians from the all-white commission. In the face of this non-cooperation on the part of the British government, how could the liberals maintain their pet theory of Indo-British collaboration? The attitude of liberals was explained by a resolution passed at a public meeting held at Allahabad in December, which was presided over by Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru, and which considered the exclusion of Indians as a deliberate insult to the people of India, as not only does it definitely assign to them a position of inferiority, but what is worse, it denies them the right to participate in the determination of the constitution of their own country. The 10th session of the Liberal Federation held at Bombay the same year and presided over by same gentleman decided to reject the Simon Commission. Following the Unity Conference in November, the All India Muslim League met in Calcutta in December. The League passed a resolution recommending Hindu-Muslim unity on the lines laid down by Unity Conference. It also urged the boycott of the Simon Commission and accepted the principle of joint electorates with the reservation of seats for Muslims. This decision was a triumph for the nationalist Muslims, and it was possible only because such prominent Muslims as Mr. M. Jinnah and Ali brothers participated in the conference and advocated the nationalist point of view. The same month, the All India Trade Union Congress met at Kanpur, and it witnessed for the first time a compact body of communists who stood for an independent socialist republic and for a definite break with the British trade unions in Amsterdam. Towards the end of the December, the annual session of the Indian National Congress was held at Madras and was presided over by Dr. M. A. Ansari, the nationalist Muslim leader of Delhi. The Madras Congress is memorable for two reasons. A resolution was of course passed boycotting the Simon Commission at every stage and every form, but along with that another resolution was passed directing the executive to convene an all-India all-party conference with a view to drawing up a constitution for India acceptable to all parties. A somewhat contradictory resolution was also passed declaring the goal of the Indian people to be complete independence. The proceedings of the Madras Congress clearly indicated that the appointment of the Simon Commission had been made at an auspicious moment, and it had wonderful effect in the wiping up the enthusiasm of the people. From one end to other, the country exhibited a solidarity with it had seldom shown before in the recent times. It was this feeling of solidarity as also the resolve to give an effective reply to Lord Birkenshead's challenge in the House of Lords, which was responsible for the decision to convene an all-party conference. Apart from the effect produced by the appointment of all-white commission, there was another factor which at this time put an indelible stamp on the Congress. That was the awakening among the youth. The youthful element in the Congress had been demanding a more extremist ideology for some time past, and under their influence, resolutions had been passed from time to time by provincial conference recommending to an Indian National Congress that the goal of Indian people should be defined as a complete national independence. The resolution of the Madras Congress regarding independence was therefore but the logical fulfillment of a process going on within the Congress for a long time. Along with this resolution, the Madras Congress took a significant step in appointing the working committee. Representatives of the left wing and as general secretaries for the coming year were appointed Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, son of Pandit Motilal Nehru, Mr. Shoaib Qureshi, and the writer. Thus, the Madras Congress may be regarded as standing for a definite orientation towards the left. Another factor which lent significance to the proceedings of the Madras Congress was the return of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru from Europe and his participation in the Congress deliberations. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had a most interesting career. After completing his studies at Cambridge, he had been called to the bar, but when in 1920 the non-cooperation movement was launched, he threw up his professional work and joined the Mahatma. According to popular gossip, he was largely responsible for the persuading his father Motilal Nehru to do the same. He did not agree with the Swarajists on the question of working inside the legislatures, and since they came into power, they had voluntarily occupied a back seat in the councils of the Congress. Latterly, he had been to Europe with his Sikh wife, and during his stay there, he studied some of the latest developments in Europe and especially in Soviet Russia. Since his return to India, he gave expression to new ideology and declared himself to be a socialist, which was extremely welcome to the left wing in the Congress and to the youth organizations in the country. The new phase in his public career was first given expression to at the Madras Congress. The solid wall of opposition put up against the Simon Commission came as an eye-opener to the government. Something had to be done to soften the opposition. Therefore, soon after his arrival in India in February 1928, Sir John Simon wrote to the Viceroy suggesting that the sittings of the Commission should be in the nature of a joint free conference consisting of the seven British members and a body of representatives chosen by Indian legislature. In response to an inquiry from Sir Sankaran Nair, Sir John Simon further stated that the reports submitted by the committee appointed by the legislatures would be attached to the main report to be submitted to Parliament by the Commission. In spite of the above modification proposed by Sir John Simon, leaders of all parties soon after declared in a manifesto issued from Delhi that their opposition to the Simon Commission still held good. In the Indian Legislative Assembly, Lala Rajpat Rai moved a resolution repudiating the Simon Commission, and this was duly carried. No committee could accordingly be appointed by the Assembly to cooperate with the Simon Commission. Of the provincial legislatures, the Central Provinces Legislative Council alone was able to resist the appointment of a committee. In spite of the opposition of the Congress and the Liberal parties, all other provincial legislatures, however, appointed committees to cooperate with the Commission. The arrival of the Simon 7 in India in February 1928 was greeted with an all-India hartal or boycott demonstration organized under the direction of the Congress Working Committee. Enthusiasm all over the country and particularly in Bengal was very great. The public expected a positive lead from the Congress leaders, which could bring the boycott home to those against whom it was directed. But no such directions came from the Congress headquarters. Only in Bengal, the Provincial Congress Committee, on its own responsibility, launched an intensive campaign for the boycott of British goods. The day the Commission landed in Bombay, there is absolutely no doubt that if the Congress Working Committee had taken courage in both hands, they could have anticipated the movement in 1930 by 2 years, and the appointment of a Simon Commission could have been made the starting point of such a movement. When the writer visited the Mahatma in May 1928 at his ashram at Sabarmati, he reported to him the public enthusiasm which he had met within many provinces and begged him to come out of his retirement and give a lead to the country. At that time, the reply of the Mahatma was that he did not see any light, though before his very eyes the peasantry of Bardoli were demonstrating through no tax campaign that they were ready for a struggle. During the whole of 1928 and 1929, there was so much unrest in the labor world that if a political campaign had been started at that time, it would have been well timed. Moreover, in 1928 and 1929, there was more enthusiasm and excitement in the provinces like Punjab and Bengal than in 1930. In 1930, when the movement was launched by the Mahatma, the labor unrest had subsided to a large extent, and the situation in some provinces was much quieter than the before. After starting the movement in 1930, the Mahatma observed in his paper Young India that he could have launched the campaign 2 years earlier. The responsibility for not utilizing the situation in 1928 devolves not only on the Mahatma but also on the Swarajist leaders who had the Congress machinery in their hands at that time, but who had unfortunately lost their dynamic impulse. If a leader like Deshbandhu Das had been available, then the events following the boycott of the Prince of Wales visit to India in 1921 would have been repeated in 1928. Underrated by the opposition which faced them, the Simon 7 travelled from place to place. Wherever they went, they met black flags, hostile demonstrations, and shouts of Simon go back. The government tried to organize counter demonstrations with the help of a section of the Muslims and a section of the depressed classes, but such attempts did not meet with success. Though the boycott campaign was kept strictly within the limits of non-violence, elaborate police arrangements were made wherever the commission went, and in some places unnecessarily harsh repression was resorted to. In the clashes that took place between the unarmed public and the armed police in different parts of the country, generally there were no serious consequences except in one place, Lahore. There, the black flag procession, which was being led by Lala Rajpat Rai, was charged by the police with sticks and batons. Lala Rajpat Rai, who was in the front rank of the procession, was seriously injured in the attack and was laid up in the bed for some time. He recovered to some extent at first, but there was some permanent injury to his heart which caused a relapse leading to his death. Great sorrow and indignation followed the death of Lala Ji, and since the Simon Commission was indirectly responsible for his death, the commission became more unpopular with the people who used to idealize the great Punjab leader. The activities of the leaders were not confined to a negative boycott of the commission. The great task ahead of them was to give a fitting reply to the challenge of Lord Birkenhead by producing an agreed constitution. To that end, the all-party conference met at Delhi in February and March 1928. The most thorny problem which the conference had to tackle was the question of Hindu-Muslim Sikh representation in the legislatures under the new constitution. When the conference reassembled in May at Bombay, the outlook appeared gloomy because no progress whatsoever had been made. Thanks to the prudence of Mahatma Gandhi, the conference, instead of publicly recording its failure, appointed a small committee with Pandit Motilal Nehru as a chairman to determine the principle of the new constitution for India and draft a report thereon. The committee met frequently at Allahabad and ultimately issued its report in August, which was unanimous, subject to certain reservations made in the preamble, and was signed by Pandit Motilal Nehru, Sir Ali Imam, Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru, Mr. M.S. Ane, Sardar Mangal Singh, Mr. Shoaib Qureshi, Mr. G.R. Pradhan, and the writer. The report of the committee, popularly known as the Nehru Committee, was cordially welcomed by all nationalists in the country as it rendered the work of the Simon Commission superfluous. Mahatma Gandhi sent his warmest congratulations to the Pandit Motilal Nehru, who had worked so much over the report and for whom it was a great achievement. The report was placed before the plenary session of the all parties conference in Lucknow in August and was unanimous unanimously adopted. It was again placed before the All Parties Convention in December 1928 in Calcutta, and the objections were raised at the meeting by representatives of the Muslim League, Sikh League, and Hindu Mahasabha. The opposition of the Muslim League was the most serious and served to rouse the opposition of the other two bodies. It was stated in the preamble to the Nehru report that the committee could not be unanimous on the question of the fundamental basis of the constitution, since a minority would not accept dominion status and passed for complete national independence as the basis of the constitution. The majority of the members of the Nehru committee, however, adopted Nehru dominion status as the basis of the constitution without restricting the liberty of action of those political parties whose goal was complete independence. The constitution outlined in the report was only for British India. With regard to the Indian states, the report stated that the central government should exercise the same rights in relation to and discharge the same obligation towards the Indian states arising out of the treaties or otherwise as the present government of India had exercised and discharged. A future federal linking up of the Indian states with the rest of India was, however, looked forward to. Whenever the states were ready for the surrender of rights which federation necessitated, the report recommended autonomy for the provinces and suggested the creation of Sindh and Karnataka as separate provinces. The executive both in the provinces and at the center was to be responsible to the legislature. The central legislature was to be composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives. The Senate to be elected by the provincial legislatures. Every adult of either sex was to be entitled to vote, and there would be joint electorates for Hindu, Muslim, and other communities. For a minority community, there would be reservation of seats for a period of 10 years only. In Bengal and Punjab, there would be no reservation of seats at all. There would be a Supreme Court of India and a radical restriction of appeals to Privy Council. The civil services would be under the control of the central government. The report further enumerated 19 fundamental rights which were to be embodied in the statute. The residuary powers were to be vested in the central government. The greatest achievement of the Nehru Committee was the settlement of the question of Hindu-Muslim Sikh representation in the legislatures under the proposed constitution. Such an achievement would not have been possible so soon after the recent intercommunal disturbances, but for the new situation created by the appointment of the Simon Commission. The report provided for a common electorate for all communities. Minority communities would be entitled to a reservation of seats in the legislature in proportion to their population, and they would in addition have the right to contest the elections for other seats. The reservation would, however, be only for a period of 10 years. For Bengal and Punjab, the committee decided that to have no reservation at all. The Hindus who are in minority in these two provinces did not demand any reservation as being against the principle of nationalism, and the committee considered it unfair and unreasonable that there should be a reservation of seats for the minority community, namely the Muslim, as for the Sikhs they were prepared to forego reservation of seats for their community if the other two communities did so, and if they did not, then the Sikh demanded representation in the excess of their numbers. Besides the question of a principle which appealed to the Nehru Committee, practical considerations also showed that the best solution of the Bengal and Punjab problem would be not to have any reservation there. In Bengal, under the existing constitution, the Muslims have 40% of the elected seats and the Hindus have 60%, while the Muslim population is about 54% and the Hindu population is about 46%. In Punjab, under the existing constitution, Muslims have 50% of the elected seats, the Hindus have 31% and the Sikhs have 19%, while in the population Muslims are 55%, the Hindus are 34% and the Sikhs are 11%. The Hindu-Muslim Sikh representation now in vogue is based on the Congress League scheme, which was adopted as a compromise between the Indian National Congress and All India Muslim League at Lucknow in 1926. In proportion to their population, the Muslim representation in Bengal and Punjab was reduced under Congress League scheme, because in other provinces the Muslims got representation far in excess of their numbers, and the adjustment of Hindu-Muslim interest was made on an all India basis. Muslim representation as provided under the Congress League scheme was no longer acceptable to the Muslims of Bengal and Punjab. At the same time, the Nehru Committee found it well nigh impossible to fix another proportion which would be acceptable to the parties concerned. Therefore, from the practical point of view also, the committee found it advisable to decide on non-reservation of seats in Bengal and Punjab. While the Nehru Committee was engaged in thrashing out the principles of the new constitution, interesting events were taking place elsewhere. In May 1928, I was called upon to preside over the Maharashtra Provincial Conference at Pune. The enthusiasm I met with there was striking. In my speech, I advocated some new lines of activity for congressmen which I had decided during my prolonged incarceration in Burma. For instance, I urged that the Congress should directly take up the task of organizing labor, and that youths and students should start organizations of their own for looking after their own interest and also for serving their country. I also urged separate political organizations for women in addition to their participation in the Congress organizations. From Pune, I went to Bombay and found that the youths there had already founded the Bombay Presidency Youth League and were preparing to take the initiative in national service at a time when the Congress Committee was not giving the lead expected of it. The month of June found a no tax campaign in full swing in the Bardoli subdivision in Gujarat, where in 1922 the Mahatma had sounded the order of a retreat. A 20% increase increase in land revenue assessment had been ordered by the government, and the peasants under the leadership of Mr. Vallabhbhai Patel refused to pay and resorted to satyagraha. The usual police repression followed, including the confiscation of property and land. A heroic non-violent battle was waged by the peasantry of Bardoli for several months, and ultimately the government had to yield. The whole of Bombay Presidency and particularly Bombay City rallied to the support of the Bardoli peasants, and women took an active part in the movement. The Bardoli campaign was a persecutor of the larger fight that Bombay Presidency was to wage in 1930. Out of this campaign, Mr. Vallabhbhai Patel emerged with a great reputation. Prior to this, he was of course known as one of the most sincerest and staunchest lieutenants of the Mahatma, but the Bardoli victory brought him into the front rank of India's leaders. In appreciation of his heroic service, the Mahatma gave him the title of Sardar, means leader, by which he is now generally called. At the time of all-party conference in Lucknow in August, a new development took place. While the settlement of the communal question made by the Nehru Committee was welcome to the younger nationalists, the recommendation regarding a Dominion form of government coming as it did after the Madras Congress resolution on independence was quite unacceptable to them. Their intention therefore was to oppose the adoption of the report at the all-party conference at Lucknow. Such a step would have given great satisfaction and delight to the enemies of the Congress, would have weakened the forces working for national unity, and would have increased the prestige of the Simon Commission instead of destroying it. A private meeting of members of the Congress left wing was therefore held at Lucknow to decide our course of action, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and I suggested that instead of dividing the house and thereby wrecking the all-party conference, we should content ourselves by voicing our protest at the conference and then proceed to organize an independence league in order to carry on an active propaganda in the country in favor of independence. This suggestion was accepted by the meeting of left-wingers, and following it, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and I made our opposition clear at the all-party conference on the question of independence, but refrained from dividing the house. After the conference, we started organizing branches of Independence League all over the country, and in November, at the meeting held at Delhi, the Independence League was formally inaugurated. The independence movement started at Lucknow was contemporaneous with another movement, namely the students' movement. When the boycott of the Simon Commission was launched in February, so students all over Bengal and particularly in Calcutta took an active part in it. Disciplinary action was taken against many of them by college authorities, and the students then began to feel that want of an organization of their own for fighting for their interest. Out of this experience, the students' movement in Bengal was born. The first All Bengal Conference of Students was held in August in Calcutta and was presided over by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. After the conference, students' organizations were started all over Bengal and somewhat later. Similar organizations were started in other provinces as well. The unrest in the student world was accompanied by unrest in the labor world as well. The year before, there had been a strike at Kharagpur, not far from Calcutta, among the railway workers. In 1928, a strike broke out in the Tata Iron and Steel Works at Jamshedpur, about 160 miles southwest of Kolkata, in which 18,000 workers were involved. The strike dragged on for some months. Ultimately, a settlement was arrived at between the workers and the management, which was extremely favorable to the former. Even more important than the Tata strike was the textile strike in Bombay, in which at least 60,000 workers were involved. This strike was in the first stages of phenomenal success and caused serious embarrassment not only to the mill owners but to the government as well. Following this, there was a strike in the workshop of the East India Railway at Liluna near Kolkata, in which 10,000 workers were involved. In the tin plate company at Jamshedpur, in which 4,000 workers were involved, and in the oil and petrol works at Bajbaj, about 20 miles from Kolkata, in which 6,000 workers were involved. And last but not the least, in the June mills in and near Kolkata, in which about 20,000 workers were involved. The Bombay textile strike deserves a special mention because it was under the leadership of a compact, disciplined party who were alleged to hold communistic ideas, and some of whom at least declared themselves later at a murder conspiracy case trial to be arrowed as a communist. Most of the above strikes were conducted by more militant section in the trade union Congress, and they were therefore gaining in importance from day to day. Towards the end of the year, when the trade union Congress met at Jharia in the mining area, it was found that the left wing had considerably increased their numbers, and among them the communists were a compact and well-disciplined group. A new move was taken at Congress in as much as the trade union Congress was affiliated to the League Against Imperialism. December was a month of congresses and conferences. The most important among them were the All India Youth Congress, the All Parties Convention, and the Indian National Congress. The Youth Congress was presided over by Mr. K. F. Nariman, the party leader from Bombay, who had grown extremely popular with the Congress left wing. A lawyer by profession, expression. He was at first a Swarajist member of Bombay Legislative Council, where he distinguished himself as an able fighter. He, however, came into the prominence through his attempt to expose publicly the colonial waste of money which had resulted from the back bay reclamation scheme of the Bombay government. He had to face a defamation suit in the court of law because of the allegations he made, but he came out of it with flying colors. Mr. Nariman, since he came into prominence, continued to uphold and give expression to extremist views until he was made a member of the Congress Working Committee at the instance of the Mahatma. The Youth Congress was important in as much as it inclined the emergence of a new factor in the public life of a country and gave expression to a mentality somewhat different from that which prevailed within the precincts of the National Congress. The All Parties Convention held in Calcutta during the Congress week and had unfortunate consequences. All those who did not have a hand in drafting the Nehru report now made a deed set against it. Mr. M. A. Jinnah, who a year earlier had advocated a progressive nationalist point of view at the Muslim League conference in Calcutta, now came forward with his famous 14 points in order to amend the communal settlement embodied in the Nehru report. He demanded, among other things, 1/3 of the elected seats in both houses of the Indian legislature for the Muslims, reservation of seats for Muslims in Bengal and Punjab on a population basis, vesting of residuary powers in the provinces, etc. This attitude served to make Mr. Jinnah popular with his reactionaries, co-religiousness, but undermined the value and importance of a Nehru report. Following the Muslims, the Sikhs also made extreme demands, while the representatives of the Hindu Mahasabha refused to make any further concessions beyond what had been already embodied in the Nehru report, and they even criticized adversely the concessions made by Nehru committee to the Muslim demands. It was difficult to get the support of the Muslim League for the Nehru report because of the parties within the body, based largely on personal consideration. For instance, the group led by the Sir late Muhammad Shafi took up a non-personal attitude on the communal question, and on the political question advocated cooperation with the Simon Commission. The nationalist bloc stood for wholehearted acceptance of the Nehru report and for complete boycott of the Simon Commission. The group led by Mr. Jinnah had a reactionary attitude on the communal question but advocated the boycott of Simon Commission. A meeting of the Muslim League was summoned at Delhi in March 1929 to consider the question, and there was a clash between the warring sections so that the meeting ended in pandemonium. In December 1927, when the Madras Congress decided in favor of convening all-party conference, it appeared as if the decision was a right one. This feeling was confirmed when the Nehru Committee was able to produce a unanimous report, and the all-party conference at Lucknow in August 1928 adopted it, but subsequent experience has shown that it was a mistake for the Congress to take this step, as it was a mistake for the Congress to participate in the round table conference in which other people were present who had no right to be there. The responsibility for producing a constitution belongs solely and exclusively to the party and that fights for freedom. A report drafted by all party committee can have value only if it is ratified by all parties in the country, but such ratification is never possible in a country which has been under foreign rule for some time. In such a country, there are bound to be parties which are under the thumb of the government, and these parties can always hold up the ratification of a document like the Nehru report. Moreover, what is the value of such a ratification when the other parties are not going to fight for freedom? The party head fights should not therefore look up to any other party to produce a constitution for which it alone is fighting. The most important conference of the year was the annual session of the Indian National Congress held in Calcutta and presided over by Pandit Motilal Nehru. The attendance at the Calcutta session was the largest since the inception of the Congress, and all arrangements were made on a colossal scale. Within the Congress, there were two groups: the older group, who would be content if they had a dominion form of government and who were therefore in favor of accepting the Nehru report in toto, and the left wing, who adhered to the resolution of independence passed at the Madras Congress and wanted to accept the Nehru report only on the basis of complete national independence. At a meeting of an All India Congress Committee held in Delhi in November, a compromise had been arrived at between two groups. At the instance of Pandit Motilal Nehru at the Calcutta session of the Congress, however, the Mahatma refused to accept the Delhi formula on the ground that it was a self-contradictory, and breach between two groups was thus opened once again. Attempts for a compromise were made by the Mahatma and Pandit Motilal Nehru, but the maximum concession which they could make fell short of the minimum demand of the left-wingers. Though the left-wing leaders were inclined to avoid an open split, the rank and file of the left wing would not think of a compromise. Thus, the main resolution of the Congress moved by the Mahatma Gandhi was opposed by the entire left wing, who supported the amendment moved by the writer. The Mahatma's resolution stated that subject to the exigencies of the political situation, the Congress will adopt the Nehru Constitution in its entirety if it is accepted by British Parliament on or before December 31st, 1929. But in the event of its non-acceptance by that date or its earlier rejection, the Congress will organize non-violent non-cooperation by advising the country to refuse taxation and in such other manner as may be decided upon. An amendment to the effect that the Congress would be content with nothing short of independence, which implied severance of the British connection, was moved by the writer and was supported among the others by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. The amendment was lost by 973 votes to 1350, but the vote could hardly be called a free one, as the followers of Mahatma made it a question of confidence and gave out that if the Mahatma was defeated, he would retire from the Congress. Many people therefore voted for his resolution not out of conviction, but because they did not want to be a party to forcing the Mahatma out of the Congress. Nevertheless, the voting showed that the left wing was strong and influential. The Calcutta Congress, coming after the Madras Congress, was in the nature of an anticlimax. The president-elect on the day of his arrival was given an ovation which would excite the envy of kings and dictators, but when he left there was a disappointment right large on every face. There was tremendous enthusiasm all over the country at the time, and everyone had expected the Congress to act boldly. But while the country was ready, the leaders were not. The Mahatma, unfortunately for his countrymen, did not see light. Hence, the temporizing resolution of Calcutta Congress, which only served to kill precious time, only madness or folly could have led to hope that the mighty British government would concede even Dominion Home Rule without a struggle. During the sittings of the Congress, a procession of 10,000 workers visited the Congress pandal to demonstrate their solidarity with the struggle for national freedom, and no appeal to the Congress to take up the cause of the straying workers. But all these signs of upheaval made no impression on the leaders. The decision that should have been made soon after the appointment of the Simon Commission, and certainly not later than the Calcutta Congress, was not made till the Lahore Congress in December 1929. But by then the situation was to deteriorate.